The wind screamed like a living thing. It clawed at the building, rattling the windows so violently I thought the glass would implode at any second. My chest ached from holding my breath too long, every muscle locked tight as if tensing could keep the storm from breaking through. The apartment groaned under the weight of it all, every wall trembling like a frail ribcage about to cave in. Water seeped through the cracks beneath the window frames, running in steady rivulets that pooled across the hardwood floor. My mother shouted something from the kitchen, but her words were ripped away by the roar outside. I stumbled toward her, ankle deep already in the creeping flood that was rising faster than I could comprehend. My father had wedged himself against the door, shoulder braced, as if his body could hold back what the Atlantic had become. His eyes flicked toward me, wild, desperate, but fierce. "Upstairs?" he bellowed, his voice raw. "Go now." The storm outside was no longer just a storm. The city itself was being pulled apart. I could hear the groan of metal, the collapse of something massive, steel buckling, glass shattering, and then a sound like thunder rolling directly beneath the ground. It wasn't thunder, it was the city tearing itself apart under the weight of the water. I grabbed my sister's arm, dragging her up the narrow stairwell that led to the roof access. The air stank of gasoline and salt, and every step shook with the building's bones. Behind me, my mother cried out, "Too sharp, too final." I turned, but all I saw was the wave. It didn't look like water anymore. It looked like the ocean itself had risen upright, a black wall folding through the first-floor windows. It took the kitchen in a single heave, snapping furniture like twigs. My father shouted her name. His voice was lost in the crush. I screamed, but my sister pulled me upward, her nails digging crescents into my arm. We burst onto the roof access, the door slamming against the wall as the wind tried to wrench it out of its hinges. The city was gone. That's the only way I can describe it. Manhattan wasn't towers and lights anymore, it was a jagged, drowning corpse. Whole blocks had vanished beneath the surge, and skyscrapers bent against the storm like reeds. We huddled there, clinging to the concrete lip of the roof, rain pelting so hard it stung like knives. My sister sobbed against my chest, her words a jumble of prayers and pleas. I couldn't hear my parents anymore. I couldn't hear anything but the hurricane trying to erase the world. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time broke apart in the storm. I remember flashes. A taxi cab floating by 4 stories high, carried on the sea that had become our street. The distant orange bloom of an explosion where a gas line had ruptured. The shriek of steel as something massive toppled. The city had no shape, only ruin. And then the roof gave way. Not all at once, just enough that a section collapsed beneath us, dropping into the waterlogged dark below. My sister screamed, her hands slipping from mine as the concrete tore itself apart. I reached for her, fingers brushing hers, close, so close, but the flood took her. One moment she was there, eyes wide with terror. The next she was gone into the black water. I was alone on the roof and the storm didn't care. I screamed until my throat was raw, until the rain filled my mouth and drowned the sound. My arms ached, my whole body numb with cold, and I knew deep in that marrow-deep way you just know that my family was gone. All of them. I don't remember when I blacked out. Only that when I opened my eyes again, the storm had passed. And New York wasn't New York anymore. The sound was constant, a pressure in the skull that wouldn't let up, like a freight train circling overhead forever. The wind screamed, the rain didn't fall but slammed, and the ocean was no longer separate from the city. The streets had become currents, rivers that dragged whole cars like toys, that swallowed people in one violent gulp and never gave them back. I tried to breathe, but the air was thick with salt and debris. Every inhale carried grit, flecks of pulverized glass, bitter smoke from somewhere down the block where a transformer had gone. Lightning split the sky but didn't vanish. It seemed to crawl along the edges of the storm clouds, veins of electric fire burning long enough to illuminate the collapse around me. The building under my feet shuddered again, the sound of snapping steel echoing through the bones of it. I pressed my back against the stairwell door to steady myself, my palms slipping on the drenched metal. I wanted to go back down to try to reach my parents, but the thought was impossible. There was no down anymore. There was only the black flood rising to claim everything. A figure staggered into view on a rooftop across the street. A man waving his arms, his mouth opening in a scream I couldn't hear. Behind him, the glass tower he stood on bowed, a groan so loud it seemed to bend the air itself. The man knew it too late. The tower tipped, cracked, and in a blink, it folded inward like paper. The sound swallowed his scream. A cloud of dust and sparks roared upward as the building vanished into the storm below. I pressed my face into my sleeve, gagging on the ash and salt. My sister's voice was still in my ear, high and thin, though I knew she was gone. The city had taken her the way it had taken everything else. The roof began to peel away, corners of the tar and gravel lifted like pages turning in the wind, pieces snapping off and spiraling into the void. I crawled toward the center, desperate to stay away from the edges, but the building shuddered like a dying animal. Every time the wind hit, I felt it give a little more. Something slammed into the side of the building, a shipping container torn from the docks and hurled inland like a toy. The impact made the whole structure convulse, the stairwell door flying open behind me. For a split second, I saw the interior of the building, floodwater foaming up the stairwell, furniture and plaster spinning in the current. The water was climbing, hungry, clawing up toward the roof where I clung. I screamed for help. My throat burned, the sound ripped from me like cloth tearing, but no one heard it. No one could. The storm had drowned even the concept of voices. The city was unrecognizable, streets I had walked every day were gone, buried under a sea of black water choked with debris. Fire escapes tore loose and swung like broken bones. Windows imploded one by one like they were detonating from within. A bus rolled down an avenue turned river, its headlights still glowing faintly underwater as it drifted past like some drowned corpse. I remember the smell most of all. Salt, yes, but layered with oil, burning plastic, sewage ripped from the bowels of the city. It was a stench of death before the bodies had even been counted. The building lurched again and I dropped to my knees, clutching the slick surface. My teeth clattered from the cold, but the fear kept me moving. I crawled across to the highest point of the roof, a broken antenna jutting upward like a mast. I wrapped my arms around it, clinging to it like it was the last anchor in the world. All around me voices were rising, faint, broken. Screams carried on the wind, cut short by the waves. Some came from windows still glowing faintly in high rises, people trapped above the waterline, pounding on glass that wouldn't open. Others were closer, swept by in the flood, hands reaching from the current for anything to hold onto. None lasted long. The storm didn't pause, that didn't relent, that it was endless, merciless, as if the sky itself had decided to wipe clean what humanity had built here. And somewhere beneath me, through the cracks of the stairwell, I thought I heard my mother's voice, calling my name. Or maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was just the water filling everything, speaking in her tones to tear me apart inside. The roof pitched sideways that I clutched the antenna and held on, my body parallel to the ground, rain hammering my face so hard I could barely keep my eyes open. If the metal ripped free, if the whole thing went down, I knew I'd follow the rest of them into the black water. I prayed not to be saved, not even for my family back. I prayed just to last until morning, to see whether morning still existed. The night seemed endless. The wind changed direction without warning, slamming into the building from a new angle with the force of a bomb. Every shift made me think it was the last, the one that would finally peel the structure from its foundation and send it crashing into the flood below. The antenna groaned under my grip, shivering like a live thing, but I refused to let go. My arms burned, my shoulders screamed, yet I clung tighter because there was no other option. Lightning lit the world in violent, stuttering flashes. For a moment everything was visible in stark alien detail, the ragged skyline, fractured and hunched, rivers of fire where ruptured gas mains burned across the black water, bodies tumbling in the current, their arms limp, their faces turned upward as though even in death they searched for mercy in the sky. Then darkness again, so total it felt like being swallowed. I don't know how long it went on. Minutes felt like hours, hours like days. I thought I had lost all sense of time, but then I noticed something. The pitch of the storm was changing. The roar softened, fraction by fraction. The walls of rain thinned, no longer slamming sideways but falling straighter, heavier. The wind was still wild, still deadly, but it no longer shrieked with the voice of 1,000 demons, it rasped, like an old predator losing strength. It took me far too long to realize, the eye was passing. The city wasn't silent, not yet. The water still surged, rising higher with each heartbeat, swallowing storefronts, chewing upward into the second and third floors. A barge had drifted into the avenues, wedged between buildings like a stranded beast. Alarms wailed faintly under the storm's roar, broken signals crying out into a night that would never answer. But above it all there was space to breathe. I uncurled my fingers from the antenna, my palms blistered, the skin raw and slick with blood. My body trembled, every joint stiff and aching. I half stumbled, half crawled to the center of the roof again. My chest heaved with every breath, but at least I could take a breath. For the first time since it began, I believed I might live through the night. That was when I heard them. Voices. Not screams, not the shrill, panicked cries that had filled the hours before. These were low, broken voices, survivors. Across the flood, on another rooftop, 3 shapes huddled together. Their outlines flickered against the dim glow of burning debris. One of them raised an arm, pointing. I froze, uncertain if they were reaching to me or warning me. Before I could decide, the storm returned. The second wall hit harder than the first. The calm had been a trick, a cruel pause before the final blow. The wind howled again, shrieking as though enraged I dared hope. The city groaned with it, weakened bones snapping. Somewhere distant, a skyscraper collapsed in stages, each floor pancaking into the next with detonations of sparks and dust. The sound shook the ground beneath me, a chain of thunder that seemed to last forever. I pressed myself flat against the roof, arms wrapped over my head as debris rained down. Shards of metal clanged across the tar, glass shattered into powder. A section of the barge tore free, smashing into a neighboring building with an explosion of water and concrete. My world was reduced to the sound of destruction and the raw, animal instinct to survive each second as it came. I thought about my family. My father braced against the door, my mother's scream cut short, my sister's hand slipping from mine. Guilt gnawed at me, a weight even heavier than the storm pressing down on my chest. If I had been faster, stronger, braver. Maybe. But the storm didn't care about maybe. The storm was erasure. When the roof cracked beneath me, I thought it was over. The concrete split, water spitting up through the fissure. I scrambled, dragging myself toward the antenna again, but my strength was gone. My body shook with exhaustion, my vision tunneling in and out. The world around me blurred into streaks of black and white. And then, finally, mercifully, the storm began to fade. The rage of it ebbed not all at once, but in a slow, reluctant retreat. The wind eased, gusts softening into shivers. The rain thinned, falling in sheets instead of walls. The roar of water dulled to a steady, endless hiss. When the sky finally began to pale with the first thin light of morning, I could barely lift my head. My fingers were still locked around the antenna, my body drenched, trembling uncontrollably. My throat felt carved raw, my lips cracked from salt. Every breath rattled like it might be my last. But I was alive. The city wasn't. From the roof I saw it, the carcass of New York. Streets erased, neighborhoods swallowed, skyscrapers broken like teeth. Smoke curled from fires that still burned across the waterlogged ruins. Boats lay stranded atop buildings. Whole blocks had become islands adrift in a black sea. There was no sound of sirens. No helicopters. No rescue. Only the soft, endless lap of the flood against the broken city. I forced myself to stand. My legs shook, every muscle screaming, but I pushed upward until I could look out across the wreckage. My breath caught in my throat, the truth sinking into me like a knife. The storm was gone, but it had taken the world with it. The days blurred together. At first, I kept expecting the sound of helicopters, the rumble of trucks on dry pavement, the promise of order. My mind clung to it as if hope alone could summon it. But the sky stayed empty, and the streets, those that weren't still rivers, were silent but for the hiss of the tide and the moan of broken buildings swaying against their foundations. The water had receded a little, leaving behind a stinking layer of mud, salt, and sewage. Cars lay overturned and stacked on top of each other like a child's scattered toys. A bus was jammed between two buildings, its windows shattered, its seats filled with water. The smell of rot was beginning, faint but undeniable. I tried not to think about what floated in the basements and drowned tunnels. Food was the first thing that ruled me. The apartment was gone and everything inside with it. I wandered for hours, searching flooded bodegas, their aisles overturned, shelves emptied by hands more desperate than mine. I found a can of beans once, dented and swollen, and ate it cold, gagging on the metallic taste but forcing it down. It was the first thing I'd eaten in 2 days. The nights were worse, the cold crept in, wet and unforgiving. Clothes never dried, they clung to the skin like ice. I scavenged blankets from a ruined hotel, but they stank of mildew and offered little warmth. I built a nest of them in the corner of a half-collapsed office, the carpet still slick with water. Every creak of the building sounded like it would finally fall in on me. Sleep came in snatches, restless and shallow. I kept thinking of my family, my father's last shout, my mother's cry, my sister's hand slipping from mine. Their faces haunted me more than hunger, more than cold. I imagined them out there somewhere, waiting for me to find them, but I knew better. The city had swallowed them whole. It wasn't just me. I saw others. Shadows moving among the ruins, faces gaunt, eyes wild. Once I spotted a man crouched over something in the street. He froze when he saw me, his hand clutching a kitchen knife, his body hunched protectively over a backpack. Neither of us spoke. We stared at each other until the moment broke and I turned away. Trust was gone. Then came the radio. I'd found it in a ruined electronics store, half buried in mud, its casing cracked. It shouldn't have worked, but when I twisted the knob, static sputtered to life. I carried it everywhere, clutching it like a lifeline. One night, huddled in my nest of damp blankets, I heard voices through the static. Broken, faint, but human, fragments of words. Los Angeles. Fires. Midwest gone. Another voice cut in, frantic. No aid coming. DC drowned. The grid, before static swallowed it whole again. I sat there in the dark, staring at the useless radio, my body numb. The government wasn't coming. There was no rescue, no order waiting just beyond the horizon. The disasters weren't just here, they were everywhere. And for the first time I felt it fully. I was not a survivor waiting for help. I was something else now, something smaller, rawer. A single body clinging to life in the carcass of a dead nation. The city grew quieter with each passing day. The initial chaos, the wailing, the distant cries for help, faded into silence. Survivors either moved on, starved, or learned to hide. Silence was safer now. I scavenged what I could. Looted apartments, smashed storefronts, overturned delivery trucks. Most of it was spoiled or gone. The air itself carried sickness, a sour stench of mold and salt. My stomach shrank, my hands shook constantly. Once I found a stash of energy bars in a ruined gym and ate 3 at once, sick from the rush of sugar but unwilling to stop. Nights were my punishment. The cold sank deeper as summer gave way to a strange, endless wet season. I wrapped myself in everything I found, coats, towels, curtains torn from broken windows. Still, I shivered until dawn. The sound of water dripping from gutted buildings was constant, as if the city itself bled. I started avoiding other people. The few I crossed weren't friendly. A woman with eyes like glass followed me for 3 blocks, her hands hidden in her sleeves. I ducked into an alley and didn't come out until she passed. Another time I saw 3 men fighting over a case of bottled water, their screams echoing down the ruined avenue. I turned and walked the other way. The radio was my curse that I carried it everywhere, waiting for voices, for a plan, for someone in charge to say we're coming. Instead, it delivered scattered horrors. Earthquakes leveling the west coast. Tornado swarms ripping the heartland apart. Whole cities burning in the south. Every fragment painted the same truth. The storm hadn't been an isolated tragedy. It was one wound in a country bleeding everywhere at once. Once I caught a voice speaking clearly, a man with a military tone. Repeat, federal command has ceased. Survive where you are. There is no central authority. There is, then silence. I didn't turn the radio off, I just held it in my lap, the static whispering like a ghost. The city felt endless but smaller too. Landmarks I once thought eternal had been reduced to bones. The skyline was broken. Central Park was a swamp. The bridges were impassable, either collapsed or blocked by desperate knots of people who guarded them with weapons scavenged from police cars. Everywhere I looked, I saw the same thing. The storm had taken the world and nothing was coming to give it back. One night, sitting in the husk of a subway station with a fire guttering in a trash can, I whispered out loud for the first time in weeks, "I think this is it." The words felt final, heavy. The storm had been the end. The wreckage was the world now. And I was still here. The city was changing. At first, it had been nothing but wreckage, silent towers, drowned streets, the stink of mold and salt. But the silence was thinning. People were beginning to move again. Small groups, shapes in the dark. Fires flickering in the distance at night. I learned quickly to keep to the edges, to move only when I had to. Scavenging was risk enough, but wandering into someone else's claim, that was a death sentence. The old order was gone, but something else was growing in its place. On 10th Avenue I saw them for the first time. A gang of a dozen, wrapped in rags and police vests, dragging pallets of canned food behind them on a raft. They moved like predators, scanning the windows above for anyone desperate enough to take a shot at them. A man at the front carried a shotgun across his back. Another wore a construction helmet painted blood red. They weren't survivors, they were rulers. I stayed low in the ruins of a cafe until they passed. Even from that distance, their laughter carried, sharp and cruel. That night, smoke smeared the sky to the east. I climbed what was left of a fire escape and saw it clearly, a column of flame rising from what had been a housing complex. The fire burned all night, and by dawn nothing remained but black skeletons jutting up through the haze. The city wasn't empty anymore. It was being carved up. Rumors spread faster than food. In a flooded lobby, 2 men whispered about a group calling themselves the Towers, scavengers who ruled from the higher floors of midtown skyscrapers. Someone else spoke of enclaves on rooftops, survivors who had strung bridges of rope and plank between buildings, creating their own cities in the sky. Others muttered of gangs that controlled the bridges, charging passage in water, fuel, or flesh. I didn't know what was true. Maybe all of it, maybe none. But one thing was certain. Waiting for the government was pointless. New York had crowned its own kings now. I kept moving, sleeping where I could, half-flooded offices, stairwells, subway entrances that didn't stink too strongly of rot. The nights were filled with distant shouts, sometimes laughter, sometimes screams. Twice I heard gunfire. Once I smelled cooked meat and forced myself not to wonder what kind. The radio offered nothing but static. Hunger carved me down. My reflection in a shattered window showed hollow eyes, sunken cheeks, a beard sprouting wild. My clothes hung off me like rags. But I was still breathing, that meant something. One evening, near the ruins of Union Square, I stumbled across a body. A young man maybe my age, sprawled in the mud, his throat cut. His backpack was still strapped to him, swollen with water but unopened. My hands shook as I cut it free. Inside I found 3 cans of peaches, still sealed. I ate one that night, juice dripping down my chin, the sweetness almost painful after weeks of rot. The other 2 I kept, clutching them like gold. The city wasn't just a grave anymore. It was becoming something else, ugly, feral, alive in ways I didn't recognize. And I realized if I wanted to stay breathing, I couldn't just hide in the cracks. Sooner or later the city would find me. It happened on the 3rd week after the storm. I was scavenging near the edge of Midtown, a drowned grocery wedged between two collapsed buildings. The front was gutted, glass shattered, shelves overturned, but I'd learned the real finds were always in the back, places the first wave of looters hadn't bothered with. I slipped through a half-collapsed doorway into the storeroom, ankle-deep in brackish water that reeked of mold. The light was weak, filtering in through cracks above, but I could make out shapes. Crates, toppled freezers, something heavy blocking part of the wall. I waded forward, pushing aside broken cardboard. My stomach cramped at the smell of rot, but I was used to that now. Then I saw it. A case of bottled water wedged under a fallen shelf. Half submerged, labels peeling but sealed. My throat ached at the sight of it. I lunged, dragging it free, the plastic sloshing in my arms like treasure. That's when I heard boots in the front. I froze. The sound was wrong, too steady, too confident. Survivors scavenged like rats. Cautious, quick, desperate. These steps were heavy, deliberate. A voice called out, rough and amused. "Smells like a rat's in here." Another voice, sharper, "Check the back." Panic jolted through me. My hands clutched the water tighter, as if that instinct could protect it. I thought about running deeper, but there was no deeper, the back wall was blocked. I could only go forward. The first man appeared in the doorway. Broad shoulders under a wet leather jacket, a baseball bat gripped in one hand. Behind him, a second figure, thin, wiry, with a knife glinting at his side. Their eyes locked on me immediately, and the grin that spread across the big one's face told me all I needed to know. "Well, look here," he drawled, stepping into the water with a splash. Rat found itself a feast. I backed up, chest pounding, the case of water pressed against me. My voice cracked when I tried to speak. I found it first." The wiry one laughed, high-pitched, too eager. "Listen to him. Like it's still his." The big one tilted his head, studying me the way someone studies an insect before crushing it. He stepped closer, bat dragging through the water. "Rule of the city, kid. You don't keep what you can't defend." I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The wall pressed against my back, slick and unyielding. My fingers tightened on the case until the plastic crinkled, but I knew I couldn't fight them. The wiry man lunged first, knife flashing. Instinct took over. I hurled the case of water at him. Bottles burst free, splashing across the floor. He staggered, cursing, and in that heartbeat I ran. The big one swung the BAT. Whistled past my ribs, close enough that I felt the air shift. I shoved through the doorway, splashing into the wreckage of the store, slipping on mud and glass. My lungs burned as I bolted for the street. "Get him," the big one roared. I didn't look back. My legs carried me through flooded streets, past burned-out cars, past shadows watching from broken windows. My breath was ragged, my heart a hammer. Behind me, the echoes of pursuit faded slowly, replaced by laughter, mocking, certain. They hadn't bothered to chase me far. They didn't need to. The message was enough. This city doesn't belong to you anymore. Their laughter stayed with me longer than their chase. I hid for hours in the carcass of an office building, curled behind an overturned desk, shaking from more than the cold. Every sound outside sent my breath into my throat, every shadow across the windows made my skin crawl. I knew they'd let me go on purpose. They wanted me to know they were out there. And I did. I started seeing their marks days later. A red stripe painted across a collapsed mailbox. A bat carved into a wall with the word King scratched beneath it. In the distance, I caught glimpses, silhouettes against the firelight, patrols moving in pairs. They weren't just scavengers, they were laying claim. The big one, King, ruled with his bat slung over his shoulder like a crown. His wiry shadow, the knife man, never strayed far. I didn't know his name yet, but his laugh carried in the night like broken glass. They were building something, a kingdom of ruin, and they wanted everyone left in the city to kneel or bleed. The next time I saw them, I wasn't the target. I had crept toward a ruined pharmacy, hoping for medicine, maybe food. Voices drew me up short, half a dozen people huddled around a small fire in the street. Survivors, gaunt and ragged, their eyes fixed on the glow like moths. For a moment I thought about joining them. Then I heard boots. King and his man came out of the dark with 4 others. The survivors jumped, one trying to run before King's bat swung low and dropped him with a crack. The wiry man laughed, knife flashing as he snatched a bag from another's hands. No one fought back, they cowered, whimpering, while King and his pack took everything. "Payment," King said, his voice like gravel. "For protection." He leaned close to the one who'd fallen, blood running from his scalp into the mud. "Next time you don't have enough, don't bother breathing." The wiry man glanced up then, his eyes finding mine where I hid in the shadows of the pharmacy door. He didn't say a word, but his grin widened, sharp and knowing. He'd seen me. I slipped back into the dark before they could follow, my pulse pounding like a drum in my throat. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I kept expecting the knife to find me in the dark. From then on, every scavenging trip was a gamble. Every corner I turned, I wondered if I'd see that grin again. And I knew sooner or later I would. They became part of the city itself. Everywhere I went, their presence lingered. A half-burned car painted with crude red stripes. A door nailed shut with a bat-shaped mark scrawled across it. I found a corpse once, face down in a gutter, throat cut clean, and the word rat carved into his arm. I didn't need to guess who left it. King and his knife man were expanding. Their crew grew, fed by fear and hunger. Survivors who couldn't fight either bent knee or ended up in the mud. The few who resisted vanished. Their empire was stitched together from scraps. A floor of an office tower, a half-collapsed parking garage, a patch of street where fires always burned. The ruins were their castle, their banners painted in blood and ash. I learned to move like a shadow. Never stay in one place too long. Never light a fire where it could be seen. When I scavenged, I took only what I could carry fast. More than once I turned a corner and froze, catching sight of them at a distance, their laughter drifting over the ruins, their boots stomping through waterlogged streets. The knife man, the grin, started haunting me. Always behind King, always watching. He was wiry, quick, his face sharp as a blade. And he knew I was avoiding them. Twice I caught his eyes across the distance, and both times he gave me the same smile, like a wolf baring its teeth. He never raised his knife, never chased, just smiled. Like he was waiting. One night, I slept in a ruined church, the pews broken and the floor soaked with stagnant water. I woke to footsteps outside. Laughter. Low voices. I pressed myself against the cold stone, my body stiff with terror. Rats close, I heard Grin say, soft and eager. A pause, then King's voice, deep, certain, not yet. Let him run a little longer. Their footsteps faded into the night. I didn't sleep again until dawn. The city wasn't big enough anymore. Every alley felt like a trap, every silence too loud. Their presence wrapped around me tighter and tighter, like the storm itself hadn't ended but had simply taken human form. I began to wonder if they were letting me live. Not out of mercy but because the hunt was sweeter this way. And part of me feared they were right. The city had been dead quiet for 2 days. No voices, no laughter in the distance, no echo of boots in the hollow streets. That silence was worse than the storm, it felt deliberate, staged. I told myself I was paranoid, but deep down I knew. I was moving through the husk of 34th Street, picking through the remains of an electronics shop that had been stripped to the studs. All I'd found was a cracked flashlight and a box of batteries swollen useless from the flood. I shoved them into my pack anyway. Survival had taught me not to waste anything. That's when I heard the crunch of glass behind me. I spun, heart leaping into my throat. Grin stood in the doorway, knife hanging loose at his side. His teeth gleamed in the dim light, that same jagged smile like he'd been waiting here for me all along. Rat, he said softly. My breath caught. My hand closed on a length of pipe I'd been carrying, but my arm shook so badly I could barely raise it. Bootsteps thundered outside. King entered a moment later, filling the doorway with his bulk, bat resting across his shoulder like a scepter. His eyes found me and narrowed in satisfaction. End of the line, he rumbled. I backed up, heel bumping into a collapsed shelf. My chest heaved, panic tearing through me. I don't have anything. Nothing worth, not about what you have. King stepped closer, water sloshing around his boots. It's about who runs this city. And you. You keep pretending it's you. Grin's laugh cut through me. Told you we'd catch him. Rats always come back to the same holes. King shifted his grip on the bat, his eyes never leaving mine. Run, fight, beg, it don't matter. Lesson's the same. He swung. The bat whistled through the air, missing my head by inches as I ducked. The shelf behind me exploded in a spray of wood and dust. Instinct drove me forward. I swung the pipe clumsily, striking Grin across the shoulder. He snarled, stumbling back, but the grin never left his face. King's second swing caught my side. Pain erupted, white-hot, my ribs screaming as I crashed into the floor. The pipe slipped from my hands, clattering uselessly. I gasped, curling tight, the air gone from my lungs. Grin was on me instantly, knife pressed against my cheek, the blade's edge biting just enough to draw a line of blood. His breath smelled of rot, his eyes shining with delight. Please, I choked. His grin widened. Oh, I like that. King loomed above me, bat dripping with plaster dust. His face was stone, unreadable. Next time, he said, you don't get to crawl away. The knife pressed harder. I shut my eyes, waiting for the cut, for the bat to crush my skull. But then King's voice snapped sharp. Enough. Grin hesitated, the knife trembling against my skin. His grin faltered for just a second. Then he pulled back, licking the blood from the blade with a slow, deliberate motion. Let him crawl, King said, his gaze bored into me, heavy and cold. Let the city chew him. When he's half dead, we'll finish it. They turned and left, their boots splashing through the wreckage, their laughter echoing until it bled into the silence. I lay there, gasping, ribs blazing with pain, blood trickling warm down my face. I was still alive, but not because of luck. Because they wanted me alive. The bruises didn't fade, They deepened, spread like ink across my ribs and back, each movement reminding me of the bat's weight. I moved slower, hunched, pressing a hand to my side every time I coughed. Each breath felt like splintered glass in my chest. But I kept moving. If I stayed in one place, they'd find me again. Every ruin felt smaller now, every shelter a trap waiting to close. I rotated through hiding spots, an overturned taxi one night, a drowned office the next, a subway entrance thick with mold after that. I slept in fits, waking at every creak, every drip of water. And always I felt them. Sometimes it was real, their marks, their patrols, grins, laugh echoing faint in the distance. Other times, it was only my mind replaying that moment, the knife's cold edge across my cheek. But whether real or imagined, the effect was the same. I flinched at shadows, I froze at footsteps, I starved rather than risk being seen. Food dwindled. I gnawed on stale crackers I found in a desk drawer. Drank rainwater caught in a rusted pan. My hands shook constantly, my legs weak. Every day was a question. Collapse here or stumble on a little further. Once, I spotted them from a rooftop, King's bulk unmistakable, his bat resting across his shoulder as his crew marched below. They carried sacks of food scavenged from somewhere, laughing, tossing bottles between them. Grin looked up suddenly, and for a moment I swore his eyes met mine across the distance. His grin spread wide, deliberate, before he vanished under the shadows of a gutted skyscraper. Another night, I woke to voices outside my hiding place, the gutted shell of a laundromat. I pressed myself against the washing machine, holding my breath, listening. "Rat's close," Grin whispered, voice sharp with hunger. "Let him run," King answered, calm, certain. "He'll break himself." Their boots faded. My body stayed rigid until the sky began to pale. The city was killing me, but it wasn't quick enough for them. They wanted to watch me starve, weaken, crawl. I wasn't a threat to them, I was their entertainment. I told myself to keep going, just one more day, just one more breath. But each step felt heavier, my vision swimming, the edges of the world softening as hunger hollowed me out. One evening, I collapsed in a burned-out stairwell. My body gave out, too weak to keep moving. I lay there, cheek pressed against cold concrete, watching a single drop of water fall through the ruined ceiling again and again. I thought about letting go. But then, somewhere outside, I heard laughter. Grin's laughter. And something in me refused. I wasn't dead yet. Not until the city itself pried me from its bones. The days bled together. Hunger hollowed me out until even walking felt like dragging chains. My body shrank, bones jutting sharp beneath my skin, fingers trembling whenever I tried to grip anything. My vision blurred at the edges, tunneling so often I wondered if I'd wake at all each time I blinked. The city seemed to sense it. The ruins grew sharper, more hostile. Every stairwell I climbed threatened to crumble beneath me. Every dark alley smelled of rot and sickness, daring me to breathe too deeply. The air itself seemed to conspire, damp and heavy, a chill that clung even when I layered myself in rags. Scavenging became worse than pointless. Shelves stripped bare. Vending machines cracked open long ago. I found crumbs once, pressed flat against the bottom of a drawer, stale, mold-threaded, but I licked them up anyway. They burned my stomach, but at least it reminded me I was still alive. Water was no better. The storm left plenty, but it was tainted, filthy pools glimmering with oil, metallic with blood. I drank rain when I could catch it, tipped rusted gutters into bottles. Still, my lips cracked, my throat scorched raw. Nights became an enemy all their own. I couldn't keep warm. The blankets I'd hoarded stank of mildew, heavy with damp, useless against the wet chill that sank into bone. I shook until dawn, teeth clattering, ribs aching from the shiver. Sleep was shallow, full of visions. My sister's hand slipping, my mother's cry swallowed by water, my father braced against a door that couldn't hold. And threaded through it all, the fear of King and Grin. They didn't appear often now. That was the worst part. Once a week, maybe less, I'd catch their shadows at the edge of a street, their laughter echoing off broken glass. Sometimes I'd wake to their marks freshly painted near where I slept, a red bat dripping across the wall as if they'd been standing over me while I dreamed. They weren't hunting me anymore. They were starving me with patience, with certainty. The longer I withered, the less I would fight. They knew I couldn't leave the city, bridges broken, tunnels flooded, gangs choking off every path. So they let me rot in their kingdom, circling closer, waiting for me to collapse so they could claim the end. And I was collapsing. I fell in the street one afternoon, knees hitting the mud, palms scraping glass. I stayed there, breath shallow, cheek pressed to the cold filth. My arms refused to lift me, my chest ached too much to try again. For a long time I just lay still, listening to the city breathe around me. That's when I realized, I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of dying. Not of them. The fear had burned out, leaving only exhaustion. The city wanted me gone, and maybe it was time to listen. I closed my eyes, let the rain soak me, let the darkness fold closer. For the first time since the storm, I thought maybe I wouldn't wake again. And I almost didn't. It happened when I was too weak to run. I'd collapsed in what was left of an office tower lobby, the marble floor cracked, the ceiling half-caved. Rain leaked in steady drips from above, cold rivulets tracing down my face as I lay curled against the wall. My stomach cramped in on itself, my lips split, my body a trembling husk. I thought maybe this was it, the city finally claiming me. Then I heard boots. Slow. Heavy. Confident. I tried to push myself up but my arms gave out. My vision swam, dark corners bleeding into each other. When the shadows shifted, I knew it wasn't my mind. They were here. King stepped into the ruin first, his bulk filling the broken doorway, his bat tapping against his shoulder. Behind him, Grin slipped in, knife dancing between his fingers like a toy. Their eyes found me immediately. Grin's smile split wide. Told you he'd rot down to bones. King didn't smile, that he studied me the way a butcher studies meat. Then he stepped closer, the bat dipping toward the ground. End of the line, rat. I tried to crawl but my body betrayed me, dragging only inches before collapsing. My breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. I wanted to speak, to beg, to do something, but all that came out was a dry croak. Grin crouched low, knife gleaming in the gray light. He tilted his head, eyes bright with delight. Can I cut him this time? King's voice was calm, cold. Do it slow. The knife pressed against my throat. I felt the edge, cold, sharp, patient. Grin leaned in close, his grin stretching wide enough to hurt. You've been fun, rat. But every game ends. The blade nicked skin. Warm blood trickled down my neck. My body shook, not from fear this time, but from the useless twitch of a cornered animal. King lifted his bat, raising it high. The shadow of it fell across me like the final weight of the storm. This was it. Not hunger, not the city. The predators had come to claim their prey. The knife pressed deeper, a bead of blood sliding down my throat. My vision tunneled, the ruined lobby shrinking until it was just the glint of Grin's eyes and the shadow of King's bat above me. My body screamed to move, to fight, but there was nothing left until the bat came down. I rolled. Not far, not clean, just enough. The bat slammed into the floor where my skull had been, marble cracking under the impact. The shock of it jolted something awake in me, fear, fury, survival I didn't know. My hand shot out, fingers closing around a shard of glass lying in the mud. I drove it upward. Grin howled, jerking back as the shard sliced across his forearm, the knife clattering into the water. Blood sprayed dark against the wall. His grin twisted into something feral, his eyes wide with rage and delight all at once. King roared, swinging the bat sideways. It caught my ribs again, exploding pain through my body, but I stayed conscious this time. The glass slipped from my hand as I tumbled, lungs heaving, vision bursting white. Grin lunged, blood dripping from his arm, scrambling for his knife. I staggered up on hands and knees, the room spinning. My hand landed on the knife first. For one heartbeat, we locked eyes. His grin faltered. Then I slashed. The blade tore across his cheek, splitting it open from jaw to ear. His laughter turned to a scream, high and ragged, his hand flying to the wound as blood poured through his fingers. He reeled back, shrieking, "You rat bastard!" King's boot caught me in the chest, slamming me into the wall. The knife nearly slipped free, but I clung to it, coughing blood. His bat rose again, his face a mask of rage. Instinct, not thought, took over. As the bat descended, I hurled the knife. It wasn't a clean throw. The blade spun awkward, end over end. But luck or something darker guided it. The knife struck King's shoulder, not deep, but enough to make him grunt, enough to make him falter. The bat clipped the wall instead of my skull, the force sending chunks of plaster raining down. I scrambled past him, body screaming, vision swimming. My bare hands clawed across the floor, dragging me through mud and glass. Grin's shrieks echoed behind me, King's roar shaking the ruined walls. "Run, rat!" Grin screamed through blood and spit. "Run. We'll carve you piece by piece." Their laughter followed me as I staggered into the drowned street, half blind, ribs cracked, blood running down my neck. Alive. Barely. But alive. The city didn't give me time to breathe. I stumbled into the street, chest on fire, blood slick on my shirt. Behind me, King's roar tore through the ruins, followed by Grin's unhinged laughter. Boots pounded the broken pavement, closer, closer. I forced my legs to move. Every step was agony, but fear carried me further than strength could. I ducked into an alley half-choked with debris, hurdled a collapsed sign, nearly went face-first into the mud. Rot. Grin's voice sliced the night, ragged and wet from the wound I'd left across his face. We're not done yet. The alley dead-ended in a wall of cinder block. I spun, vision swimming, desperate. To my left, a fire escape hung crooked, its ladder twisted, dangling just out of reach. My ribs screamed as I jumped, fingers scraping rusted metal. For a moment I thought I'd fall, but desperation made me climb, blood dripping down onto the alley floor. King's bat slammed into the wall below, sparks flying. His hand reached up, massive, clutching at my ankle. I kicked wildly, heels smashing against his grip until he let go. Grin scrambled at the base, his grin smeared in blood, his knife flashing as he stabbed upward, just missing my legs. I hauled myself onto the platform, gasping, body shaking. No time to stop that I climbed higher, the fire escape rattling beneath me, bolts screeching loose. Behind me, King grabbed the bottom, the whole structure groaning under his weight. I crawled onto the rooftop just as the escape tore free, crashing down in an explosion of metal and dust. For a second, silence. Then King's furious bellow, promising he wasn't done. I staggered across the rooftop, lungs burning, vision doubling. The city stretched ahead, black and broken, every shadow a threat. My body wanted to collapse, but their voices followed me still, closer, climbing, relentless. I wasn't running from the storm anymore. I was running from predators who wouldn't stop until they had my blood. And I knew I couldn't run forever. The rooftops buckled beneath my feet, gaps yawning between buildings where the storm had torn whole chunks away. I stumbled, ribs screaming with every ragged breath, blood dripping down my neck and soaking my shirt. My legs shook, but the voices behind me drove me forward. Run, rat. Grin shrieked somewhere below, his voice broken, wet with blood, his laughter twisting into a howl. Run till you drop. King didn't laugh, his roars were steady, deep, echoing across the ruins. A predator's voice, not a judge delivering sentence. I leapt a gap between two rooftops. My foot slipped on the landing, gravel scattering into the flood below, but somehow I caught myself, staggering forward. Behind me, their shadows climbed, relentless, closing the distance. There was nowhere left to go. The roof ahead was shattered, half of it caved inward. Beyond that, nothing but empty air and a 50-foot plunge into black water. I skidded to a stop at the edge, chest heaving, dizziness pulling the world sideways. Grin crawled up first, his face a nightmare, split open from jaw to ear, blood crusted down his neck. His grin was still there, wider now, insane. He twirled his knife in bloody fingers, eyes locked on me. King hauled himself up behind him, bat across his shoulder, his bulk filling the skyline like a wall of muscle and rage. He didn't speak at first, that he just stared at me, calm and certain, like this had been decided from the moment they first saw me in that grocery store. You made us work for it, King said finally, voice low, gravel thick. But every rat gets caught. Grin advanced, knife raised, that I backed up, my heels finding only air. The city spread out behind me, dark water, broken steel, smoke still drifting into the night. My arms shook as I raised them, empty hands trembling, my body broken and useless. Do it, I rasped. My voice cracked. End it. Grin lunged. I didn't think that I didn't plan. My body moved on instinct, one last spasm of survival. As his knife slashed down, I twisted sideways, grabbed his wrist with both hands and wrenched. The blade sliced past my ribs, hot and deep, but momentum carried him forward. He screamed as I shoved. His body pitched over the edge, arms flailing, his grin finally twisting into terror. The scream cut off when he hit the water far below, swallowed instantly by the black tide. Silence followed. For a moment, only my ragged breathing filled the night. Then King stepped forward, his face carved from stone. He looked down into the dark where Grin had vanished. Then back at me. You think that saves you? His voice was steady, calm, more terrifying than a roar. He raised the bat, its weight gleaming in the dim light. It just makes it slower. I staggered back, but there was no more roof behind me, only the plunge. My vision swam, my legs buckled. I thought of my father, braced against the door. My mother's CRY.my sister's hand slipping. And I knew, this was the end of running. King charged, bat swinging in a wide arc. I ducked, too slow, pain exploding across my shoulder as the blow spun me. My knees gave out, my body collapsing onto the roof's edge. The world tilted. My arms flailed, grabbing nothing but air. The city fell away beneath me. For one brief heartbeat I was weightless. Then I plunged into the black water. The shock of it stole everything, breath, thought, even pain. The cold swallowed me whole, dragging me down, down into silence. The roar of the world above vanished, replaced by the endless hush of the flood. I opened my eyes, the city stretched above me, broken lights glowing faint through the water, the silhouette of King leaning over the roof, bat raised high. My chest screamed for air, lungs burning. My body fought, kicking weakly. And then I let go. The water closed over me, heavy and dark. And the city finally claimed me. The water welcomed me like the storm had the night it began, merciless, crushing, absolute.